Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another live stream on the Ray Law International channel. My name is Anthony Ray. I'm one of the attorneys here at Ray Law International, and boy, do we have a lot to cover. Our session today is just going to be about 30 minutes or so. However, that depends a lot about your questions. So as you have questions, make sure you go ahead and put those questions in the chat. No matter what medium you are on, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, it doesn't matter. Make sure you get your questions in the chat so that we can answer those. We'll make those a priority. Today we're talking about H-1Bs. And as you know, it's really big in the news. H-1B is right front and center in the news everywhere you go. We're going to talk a little bit about what to expect this year and going forward. But before we get there, we're going to go and talk about a couple things that I think are very important. Right now, immigration is front and center. All areas of immigration is important. But first, we're going to cover three real quick. One is the I-9 compliance for employers. The second is going to be getting H-1Bs for DACA holders. And then finally, we're going to touch on briefly one other area that we want to cover regarding before we jump in. So the main thing I want to talk about first, the first changes and things that employers need to know. For employment immigration, employers have to make sure that people are qualified and authorized to work. Every employer does this. Doesn't matter whether you're a U.S. citizen, foreign national, everybody, all of us who work, issues or submit what's called an I-9. Form I-9 is the form that must be submitted with documentation that shows that we are eligible to work in the United States. Now, the couple things that we can expect going forward for I-9s. Employers are prohibited, as you already know, from hiring individuals who are not authorized to work in the United States and must maintain the Form I-9, and in some circumstances, related supported documents during and for a specified period of time during the individual's employment. While the I-9 process appears straightforward, common errors such as missing signatures, incomplete information, or expired documents can result in significant penalties if detected by Immigration and Customs Enforcement during an inspection or audit. Employers who fail to comply with regulations risk fines and civil penalties and possible criminal liability. We have a recent case, even out of the Sixth Circuit, where we'll just briefly look at what happens when you do not comply with our employment laws, our labor laws. The next thing to look out for is more employers should ensure that their HR departments, legal teams, and hiring managers are well trained in the proper procedure for Form I-9 verification. Okay? Mistakes can be very, very costly for employers. The next thing, you want to make sure you review your participation in E-Verify. Although currently mandatory only for federal contractors and employers in certain states, the incoming Trump administration will push for a nationwide expansion of E-Verify. So look for that. There's going to be a renewed focus on large-scale worksite enforcement actions, often referred to as raids of businesses suspected of employing undocumented workers. Now, we haven't seen that much over the past 4 years, so look for that. If you're an employer that's not following the labor laws, you need to make changes immediately. Feel free to reach out to us or talk to your in-house counsel or corporate counsel to make sure that your company is compliant, okay? And finally, one of the things we can expect is if you would like, let me see. Oh, no. So those are the main things that you want to cover with the I-9. What I wanted to share regarding the I-9 is there was a recent case, which I want to share with you. can't put it up on the screen. I'm just going to pull up the information and kind of share it live stream with all of you. But it just kind of shows, how serious it can be when employers do not do what they're supposed to. Okay. Let's see. Where are we? Okay, I'm gonna go over it. It's a case, believe it's called Broadgate here out of the Sixth Circuit. It originated here in Michigan. But basically, there was a corporation or company in Rochester, Michigan, that failed to pay its foreign national employee, okay, under the H-1B program. A lot of people are concerned about, the violations under the H-1B program. It really isn't. This is just one of the examples, okay? So this is just an example. It's a very rare situation. 99.9% of employers pays H-1B workers the wages they're supposed to be paid, okay? But if they don't, in this particular case, the employer here in Michigan did not pay the employee the full required amount for the prevailing wage under the H-1B. If you don't know, under the H-1B, the employers must pay employees a certain amount per year, for example. And in this case, the employer didn't pay the employee about $30,000. Okay, and what happened is, of course, the person who did get paid made a complaint to the Department of Labor. The Department of Labor then required the payment and did an investigation. They'll come talk to the employer, see if it's a willful investigation, if it's willful of non-payment, or if it's just a mistake, or if there's some other issues. But in this case, it was found that it was a willful decision of the employer not to pay the wage. Of course, the employer had to pay the wage, and on top of that, the civil penalties, in this case, just civil, not criminal, was $68,000. Okay, so nearly $100,000 judgment was, forced. The employer had to pay the wages, but that's $68,000 just because they did not comply with the labor laws. So for all of you guys out there, I know there's a lot of news headlines out there where it seems like every second some change. Oh, there we go. Hopefully you can hear me. Can you hear me now? Okay, great. All right. Don't know what happened there. Went on mute. So we'll check that. I think there's some issue with the internet connection. So if that happens, you don't hear me, just throw something in the chat. Let me know, and we'll get that back going. But as always speaking, don't get so caught up with all the clickbait and things that are going on. Wait and see. There's going to be a lawsuit filed either the same day or the next day. And all of the immigration things, such as the citizenship, birth rights, and things like that, all of those are going to be challenged. And it's going to take 1.5 to 2 years before the Supreme Court goes ahead and strikes most of these things down. Or many of these cases will just be lost and stuck in our courts. I was reading one report during the first presidency, President Trump's president term of the 4 years. There was about 1,000 lawsuits. We can expect around 3 times that amount with, the number of executive orders that Trump is trying to put forth and kind of go around Congress. On all of immigration, it really depends on Congress. Okay? Congress needs to act. They need to take things that are, of course, protect the border. That's fine, but also, implement sensible immigration policies, not just pick and choose what you want. Okay, we can't just pick the H-1Bs and just say, oh, that's fine and that's all I want to deal with. There's many other non-immigrant visa categories and green cards that we have to deal with. All right. And the next thing I wanted to touch before we actually dive into what we wanted to do, sorry about the sound there, is really interesting. And I know we're a little bit late on this, but for those DACA holders, there was a path. There is a way for DACA holders to get H-1B. It's good. About 40% of DACA holders would qualify for H-1Bs. So if you are a DACA holder and you're concerned about what Trump may do or the new administration may do to your status, look for the H-1B. The H-1B registration process is coming up this March. Okay, you got less than 2 months. Reach out to us. Reach out to a credible, reputable immigration attorney that's going to explain the process to you and see if you can get selected for the H-1B and have that ready in case DACA gets taken away, limited, or impacted in some way by the current administration. So just to let those out there who are interested, there's a way to get what's called a D3 waiver for DACA beneficiaries so that they can change their status, go out, come back in, and get an H-1B status. Many DACA holders are professionals, doctors, lawyers, accountants, and engineers, and all kinds of positions. But if you're a professional, this is something that would be, very useful for you. For the other DACA holders, before Trump became president, we looked at advanced parole, of getting a lot of people paroled back in so that in the future you can adjust status. Here at our office, we're happy to have done that that you can rely on and that you can also go ahead and take care of your family. Apologize for the internet going in and out. We're going to monitor that and make sure that I stay connected. Uh, don't know, it is freezing cold out here with negative sub-zero degree weather, but that shouldn't impact the internet so much. Apologize about that. All right, guys, let's dive into H-1Bs. H-1Bs are for professionals, positions that require a 4-year degree. Now, from January 17, 2025, new final rules were implemented that impact H-1B. We only have a few minutes to cover some of those today. We're going to try to get through as much as we can. Probably won't get through them all, but let's get started. So, what are some of the current challenges that we face with H-1Bs? One, policy shifts increased. Let's do this. We're going to see more scrutiny with the H-1Bs. Did you know that right now for the H-1Bs, only about 2.5% of the H-1Bs are denied, okay? And that's even down from the prior year. So there's not a high denial rate. That means that we do have qualified positions and qualified people going into these positions. Also remember, H-1Bs, there's only 85,000. That's it, 85,000 that are issued each year. So it's not like there's a whole bunch of jobs being taken away from U.S. citizens, okay? It's only 85,000. To bring that in perspective, each month, usually the government will introduce a new jobs of about 200 to 250,000 per month, okay? So we're talking a small fraction of that. There's many jobs for U.S. citizens out there. If you're concerned about it, make sure that your kids and your family member or you yourself get into the STEM field. That's what employers are looking for: science, technology, engineering, or math. get into those fields and then get a job. Okay? So, don't sit on the sideline and complain. Get into the game, compete yourself, get your children in there. If not, that's the choice that you made. And yes, if us US citizens do not fill those jobs, employers have to fill them somehow. Okay. And one small way, very small, is through the H-1B program. So don't get alarmed when we talk about H-1Bs. They're not taking over the US. It's still limited. It has not grown since it was really introduced, other than the 20,000 that was added to the 65,000. So the breakdown of the 85,000 is 65,000 are regular H-1Bs, meaning they can be bachelor's degrees, master's, doctorates, while as the additional 20,000 are for foreign nationals who get their master's degree or higher from a U.S. University. Okay, so it's very narrow. Okay. Excellent. One, we can, with the new administration, we can see an increase of denials, okay, and more requests for evidence. All right. What does that mean? That means the USCIS is going to be more strict, ask for more documentation. It's going to The next thing is that we should see is impact in changing the lottery system. As I mentioned, we have the H-1B cap lottery system coming up. We're going to want to make sure that you are registered. We're getting many companies ready for our March filing. Look for that. We should get news specifically from the USCIS in February of the exact dates, and then we can submit, and hopefully you are selected. Now, to bring this into perspective as well, 85,000 visas. That's it. Last year we had roughly 400,000 people applying for 85,000 seats. That's nearly 22% if you just do straight math. Obviously, if you're a bachelor's holder, you're even lower than that. Okay, meaning if you're based off of any bachelor's, whether US or foreign, you're going to have less than 20% chance of being selected. That doesn't mean don't try. Right now, the filing fees are very reasonable, so you want to go ahead and enter the lottery, okay? But the odds are not as bad as our regular lotteries that we have or that you're familiar with, but the odds are not very high either, especially since you've invested time and money. Trump has talked about, just giving green cards or H-1Bs to people who graduate from college. However, that wasn't in his executive order yet. So we'll see if that's going to be coming out today or this week or very soon that he's going to do that. Next, let's look at policy changes, okay? Last time Trump was in power, or the Trump administration was in power, they really were pushing for higher salaries and highly skilled applicants. We're talking the cream of the crop. Okay, it sounds great. You do want to have those key people, but the H-1B program was designed not just for Microsoft, Apple, and Facebook. It was designed for all companies, and the majority of people are employed by small businesses. What they had proposed was having a higher salary and only giving it, for example, if you're in California, and your salary is 300,000, that's fine. You get the H-1B. However, if you're in Iowa, for example, and your prevailing wage for the H-1B, same position, let's say it's a aerospace engineer, and your salary is only 60,000, well, you're going to lose out because under the Trump administration, they want to give it to the highest. And they're assuming, there's a huge assumption that the brightest and the smartest would take the higher salary job. From and that's not always true. Maybe it's more beneficial for the foreign national to take the one position in Iowa, okay, or wherever it may be. So there's a lot of assumptions that are preconceived, which are not correct, and we need to have the system fair for everybody. Okay, um, there hopefully they make a shift to help out small businesses and startups. We get calls every week about businesses throughout, just this week. We need workers in this state or this area, and this is the only way we can find them. So it's critical. We do have a wage shortage in many sectors. Okay, we can't go over all of those today, but there are wage shortages in various locations. Employers want to do business. There is business to be done, and we need foreign nationals. Almost all the industrial companies, their birth rates are not high enough, so we need people to come in and fill these occupations. H-1B is not a bad thing. Most employers do comply, and there are safeguards such as what we talked about before if the employers don't pay. Let the government function and do what it's supposed to, and the system will work. Another thing that we can see is increased scrutiny of employer-employee relationship. Now, one of the great things about the final rule that just came out is they did away with the whole employee-employee relationship, and they changed the definition. I'm not going to get into the minutia. In the final rule, it reads like a law book. Okay, that's why you need an attorney to break down and make sure they're analyzing your H-1B cases. But the whole employee-employee relationship, isn't really the standard right now. It's been changed to make sure that there is a professional occupation available and they actually have a real job available. The next, to move along, I'm going to try to keep it to 30. Let's see if you have questions, make sure you put them in the chat. Okay. This is your opportunity to ask questions, not just to have me talk. You can always set up a consultation with me in chat. We can go over all these in detail, but if you have questions, put them in the chat. Let us know what's on your mind, what you're facing with the H-1Bs, and what your concerns are, and we would love to address those. The next thing is the wage level thresholds. The Department of Labor sets in certain prevailing wages depending on what level. There's right now 4 levels with the Department of Labor, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 being the highest, and they're all preferenced on the education and experience for that position. It all depends on what the employer has as their minimum wage. So when we come up with the prevailing wage determination, it's very important that we get that right so the employer knows. Now, with all things, the government charges a lot more, is used to paying a lot more than the average small business. So let's say you have a teacher. In certain areas, you may pay them $60,000, but in rural areas, it's only $40,000. Okay, there can be a huge wage gap depending on the location, and often what we find is that prevailing wage tends to be a little bit higher, or in a lot of situations, higher than what employers are willing to pay or can pay, and that's usually impacts small businesses and medium businesses. Okay. The next thing is how the new regulations will impact the salaries, as we just talked about. Are employers going to be forced to pay higher salaries? How is that going to impact things? And a lot of these employers, we just can't find the engineers or the people with the specific skills. We had this back in 2007 when we had the recession. We're seeing it again. Encourage your children and family, get into the STEM field, okay? Many areas to get into: aerospace, AI, all kinds of things to do as technology evolves. Next, we want to talk about, for employers, the key impact for stakeholders. For example, employers, changes in recruitment strategy to meet new requirements. Most of our clients are not required to do recruitment, but there are certain situations in the H-1B ecosystem where employers are required, depending on how many H-1B employers employees they have and also how much they're paying. Most of our employers are paying above the prevailing wage or above 60,000, so we normally don't have to deal with recruitment issues. But the new administration could require all employers to do recruitment and verify that they actually did look for U.S. workers before they hire this H-1B worker. Next, increased administrative and compliant costs. It's already expensive. We just had the asylum fee added on. Small employers have to pay $300 each time. Larger employers, 26 or more employees, have to pay $600. The fees are already going up. They just increased them on April 1st. We could probably see that become more expensive. On average, just in filing fees alone, you can look to pay anywhere from $4,000, and if you add premium processing on there, $4,000 to $6,000. So doing the H-1B process is not cheap. Most employers would love to hire a U.S. citizen and not pay $6,000 or $10,000 or $12,000 to bring an employee on. However, they need them. And if they're willing to pay $4,000, $6,000, $8,000, $10,000 to bring them on, that there's an economic reason for that, and they should proceed. Additionally, the next one is immigration and HR professionals. They need to navigate the ever-changing landscape of immigration compliance. We just talked about that about I-9s. The rules changes have changed about the LCA, labor condition application, and whether the employee is working remote or not, and how to make sure that they're accounted for and they're in compliance. Also, we talked about security. Under the H-1B, each employer has to pay an initial $500 for the USCIS to send someone out and make sure that the person is actually doing what they're doing. Now, they have a right to go to the in-client or third-party site, or they even have the right to come to the residence if that is where the person is actually working. And if the person doesn't let them in the residence to show them the work site, work location, and that they're actually working, then the H-1B could be revoked, or they could just deny the H-1B right out. So the Trump administration has many tools to make sure that the H-1B compliance is good. Depending on the week, as you can see, the administration, H-1Bs are good, H-1Bs are bad. In the big scheme of things, it's a very small part of our economy, our U.S. economy. You shouldn't really need to worry about it from the average U.S. citizen. I believe what Trump was also referring to when he was talking about chefs and others, that's the H-2B, okay, not the H-1B, the H-2B, which is for temporary workers coming. And that system is separate. They have their own cap of, I think it's 66,000, and that's a whole nother mess and a discussion for another day. In addition, just to keep going, global competitiveness and talent retention. If there aren't enough visas available, people are going to go to other locations, okay? Canada, Australia, the UK, places where they can make comparable salaries and also work. So we want to make sure that we keep the talent here in the US. We want to compete. We want to make America great, so we need good people who want to work and make the US better. H-1B category allows that. They should really increase the numbers, because employers are not going to hire people if they don't have the business to do it, okay? And when we hit the recession, that was very clear. All H-1B usage plummeted, okay? People were sent back to their home countries. Their green cards were lost. People's lives were devastated and changed because of the recession. Also, another impact of not retaining global talent is, innovation and research. The reason that the U.S. has such a lead in many areas is we are able to have the talents, that are thinking forward, are innovative, and are really, really looking to, do what's necessary to move forward and make money, grow, and seek new technologies. I just want to take a minute before we continue. If you don't have an immigration attorney, or if you just have a good immigration attorney, you really need to talk to us and get the best immigration attorney. We're going to speak to you, break everything down, listen to you, make sure you understand, and just really help you understand all the details of the final rules of the H-1Bs and the changes. These changes are going to happen weekly, monthly. You need to be talking to your immigration attorney monthly and how it's going to impact your current staff. Even if you already have an H-1B, even if you have a green card pending, you want to know how these changes are impacting you and your family. So reach out to us, HR senior managers. We're here to help you guys navigate this chaotic immigration landscape. A couple more things. One of the main changes is with the H-1B is the actual form, okay? We'll get to border in a minute, but it's the actual form. From January 17, 2025, there's a new form, I-129, that must be used. If your attorney doesn't know about it, make sure they use the form. It'll say it right on the form of the correct edition. Prior versions will not be accepted. So if you don't want your H-1B denied, use the current form. The current form complies with some of the new requirements and the approach that the USCIS will be taking in adjudicating H-1B matters. Now, reform at the border, context of immigration policy, we're going to see what happens at the border. One of the main challenges we see at the border is going to be for our TN visas, both on the Canadian side and the Mexican side. Everybody else under H-1B, Ls, Es, you're going to be applying at U.S. embassies in your home country. However, even if you get a visa when you enter the United States, expect additional scrutiny by CBP, Customs and Border Protection, of your status and that there's a job available. Just because you have a visa stamp does not mean that it's a guarantee to enter the United States. All right, let me see. Where are we? All right. So what we can expect, just kind of wrap a few things up here. What we can expect this year is, just a tsunami of ups and downs, stop, start. Is birth citizenship available? Is it not? It's going to change all the time. And the news articles don't help. The news articles makes it seem like things have already changed and they're permanent. That's not true. You're going to see the same thing with immigration policy throughout the year as Steve Miller and his gang and other people attempt to modify and make changes. There'll be lawsuits. Check with us to see how that's going to impact your employment base, whether they're L visas, E visas, O visas, P visas, H-1Bs. Reach out to us. We're here to support you and your company so that you're able to successfully navigate this immigration process. All right, guys. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. If there are any questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat. We'll be checking in later to see if, what questions there are on YouTube and LinkedIn and other platforms. So I want to thank you very much. We're heading into a lot of unknown territory. So make sure you have the best immigration with you. Until next time, stay informed, stay educated, and stay on the right immigration path. Thank you.